My fiancé's parents called me unsuitable, so she demanded a break. My single text message response cost her everything and left her family begging me to return. I thought I knew Lily after 3 years together, but apparently loving someone who builds luxury hotels for a living doesn't prepare you for the kind of manipulation money can buy. I'm Marcus, 34, been running construction crews since I was 22 and working my way up to foreman at Davidson and Associates, where we handle everything from office complexes to custom homes for Miami's elite. I met Lily at a charity fundraiser where my company was donating labor for a community center, and she seemed genuinely impressed that I actually knew how to read blueprints and manage million-dollar projects. Her family owned Hartwell Luxury Hotels, a chain of boutique properties across Florida, but Lily worked as their marketing coordinator and claimed she wanted to build something separate from her parents' empire. For 3 years, I thought we were partners planning a future together, splitting expenses fairly and building toward our wedding at the Oceanview Resort in Miami Beach, a venue that cost us a combined $75,000 with my $35,000 contribution covering the majority. Last Tuesday, Lily came home to our shared apartment with tears in her eyes, and that particular expression I'd learned meant her parents had been filling her head with their opinions about our relationship. "Marcus, I need to talk to you about something really difficult," she said, settling onto our couch like she was preparing for surgery. "My parents have some concerns about us moving forward with the wedding, and honestly, I think they might have a point." I set down the construction plans I'd been reviewing and gave her my full attention, though something cold was already settling in my stomach. "What kind of concerns?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "They think we're rushing into something without really considering whether we're compatible long-term," she continued, not meeting my eyes. "They've been watching how we handle money, how we approach decisions, and they're worried that we want different things from life." I'd met Richard and Patricia Hartwell dozens of times over the past 3 years, and their version of concerns usually translated to thinly veiled comments about my blue-collar background and state school education. "Are we talking about compatibility, or are we talking about your parents thinking I'm not good enough for their daughter?" I asked directly. Lily's face flushed red, which told me everything I needed to know. "That's not fair, Marcus. They just want what's best for me, and maybe we do need some time to really think about whether this is right." "Time to think about what exactly?" "Whether the guy who's been splitting everything 50-50 with you for 3 years and contributing more than half our wedding costs is suddenly unworthy of marrying their precious daughter." The words came out harder than I intended, but I was tired of pretending their classist attitudes were just parental concern. "I think we should take a break," Lily said quickly, like ripping off a bandage. "Just for a few weeks so I can clear my head and figure out what I really want without outside pressure." Outside pressure, meaning pressure from me to actually follow through on our engagement instead of letting her parents dictate our relationship. I stared at her for a long moment, noting how she couldn't maintain eye contact and kept fidgeting with her engagement ring like it had become uncomfortable. "How long have you been planning this conversation?" I asked. "I haven't been planning anything. This just came up recently, and I think some space would be healthy for both of us." Something about her tone felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced this speech multiple times. I pulled out my phone and opened our shared banking app, where we'd been tracking wedding expenses and contributions. "Lily, when did you cancel our venue reservation?" Her face went completely white. The silence stretched between us until I had my answer. "You canceled the Oceanview Resort 2 days ago," I continued, reading from the transaction history. "Forfeited our $10,000 deposit and terminated the contract, all while planning to tell me we need space to think about our future." Her mouth opened and closed like she was searching for an explanation that wouldn't sound like complete betrayal. I wanted to have options in case we decided to postpone things. Options like sticking me with the financial consequences of your family's disapproval while making it look like I'm the one who couldn't commit. I stood up and walked to our bedroom, pulling out my laptop to access our joint wedding account. "Marcus, please don't do anything rash. We can talk about this rationally." But I was already transferring my $35,000 back to my personal checking account, leaving her with exactly what she'd contributed minus the non-refundable deposits her secret venue cancellation had cost us. I grabbed my overnight bag and started packing while she stood in the doorway looking panic-stricken. "What are you doing?" she asked, voice rising. "I'm giving you the space you asked for," I replied calmly, folding my work clothes with the same methodical precision I used on construction sites. "And I'm protecting my financial interests from someone who's been making decisions behind my back while pretending we're a team." As I headed for the door, I paused to send one text message to the group chat that included Lily, her parents, and her sister Claire. Lily canceled our wedding venue 2 days ago while planning to blame me for needing space. "I've withdrawn my $35,000 from our joint account. She's got exactly what she invested minus the deposits her secret decisions cost us. Hope the unsuitable guy removing his financial support helps clarify everyone's priorities." I hit send and walked out, leaving my key on the kitchen counter and 3 years of careful relationship building behind me. My phone started buzzing with calls and messages before I even reached my truck, but I didn't look back. The calls started at 6 a.m. the next morning, but I was already on site reviewing blueprints for a luxury condo renovation when Richard Hartwell decided to flex his corporate muscle. My project manager Dave handed me my phone with a grim expression. "Some hotel guy's been calling the main office demanding to speak with you, says it's urgent business." I knew exactly which hotel guy. Richard had built his empire on intimidation and leverage, the kind of man who thought every problem could be solved by finding the right pressure point and squeezing until people bent to his will. When I finally called him back during my lunch break, his voice carried that particular tone wealthy men use when they're accustomed to immediate compliance. "Marcus, we need to discuss this situation like adults. Lily's upset, Patricia's beside herself, and you've created unnecessary drama over what should have been a simple conversation between reasonable people." I sat in my truck eating a sandwich while heavy machinery operated around me, the honest sounds of actual work providing a stark contrast to his manufactured crisis. "Richard, your daughter secretly canceled our wedding venue and then tried to manipulate me into thinking I was the problem. I responded by protecting my financial interests. That's not drama, that's basic self-preservation. You embarrassed our family with that text message," he continued, anger bleeding through his controlled businessman facade. "Claire's been getting questions from her social media followers, and Patricia's friends at the country club are treating this like some kind of scandal." So the real issue wasn't Lily's deception or my hurt feelings, but the fact that their carefully maintained image had taken a hit. "Maybe your family should have considered the embarrassment factor before calling me unsuitable and orchestrating this entire breakup behind my back," I replied. "I know about the lunch meetings, Richard. I know Patricia's been telling anyone who'll listen that I'm a gold digger trying to marry into money I didn't earn." The silence on his end told me I'd hit the target. "Furthermore," he said, voice dropping into what I assumed was his boardroom intimidation register, "I've been making some calls about Davidson and Associates. Interesting company, lots of contracts with hospitality groups. Be a shame if certain business relationships became complicated." There was direct corporate retaliation because I dared to withdraw my own money from a wedding account after his daughter betrayed me. "Are you threatening my livelihood because I wouldn't let your family financially manipulate me?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "I'm suggesting that actions have consequences, and smart men consider all the angles before making moves that affect powerful people." I hung up and immediately called my lawyer, Tom Morrison, a guy I'd worked with on construction contract disputes who understood how wealthy families operated. "Tom, I need to document some threats and potentially file harassment charges against a hotel chain owner who thinks he can destroy my career." That afternoon, Patricia showed up at my job site wearing a designer outfit completely inappropriate for a construction zone, picking her way across muddy ground in $1,000 heels like she was navigating a minefield. My crew stopped working to stare at this obviously out-of-place woman demanding to speak with the foreman. "Mrs. Hartwell, this is an active construction site. You need to leave unless you have official business here," I said, not bothering to take off my hard hat or safety vest. "Marcus, please, we need to talk about fixing this mess before it gets completely out of hand," she pleaded, her perfectly styled hair already wilting in the Miami humidity. "Lily made a mistake, but she loves you, and this whole thing has been blown completely out of proportion." I gestured to one of my guys to continue working while we talked, maintaining the clear message that her family emergency wasn't going to shut down my professional responsibilities. Patricia, your daughter didn't make a mistake. She made a calculated decision to cancel our venue, forfeit our deposit, and then lie to my face about needing space. That's not a mistake, that's fraud. She was just scared and confused by all the wedding pressure. You know how overwhelming these things can get, especially with families like ours where there are certain expectations and traditions to maintain. Certain expectations meaning I wasn't good enough for their social circle, and traditions meaning keeping the money within their approved class of people. Here's what I know, I said, pulling out my phone and showing her the evidence I'd been collecting. Your daughter charged $4,800 to our joint credit card last month for lunch dates. Want to guess who she was having lunch with? Patricia's face went pale as she recognized the restaurant charges and realized I'd been monitoring our shared finances more carefully than they'd assumed. James Morrison, her ex-boyfriend from college, the investment banker who works downtown. 3 separate lunch dates at expensive restaurants while she was telling me we needed to cut wedding costs and be more practical about our budget. The evidence was damning, and Patricia knew it. Her daughter hadn't just betrayed me financially, she'd been emotionally cheating while planning our supposed future together. She was just catching up with an old friend, Patricia said weakly. Friends don't usually require 4-hour lunch dates at restaurants that cost more than my daily salary, especially when those friends happen to be ex-boyfriends with trust funds and family connections your husband would approve of. I watched Patricia realize that I'd figured out their entire plan, get Lily to gradually distance herself from me while reconnecting with someone from their social class, blame the relationship problems on my unsuitability, and stick me with the financial consequences of an engagement they'd never truly supported. Marcus, please, just come to dinner this weekend so we can all sit down and work this out like family, she begged. We're not family, Patricia. We never were, and after this week, we never will be. The real scope of Lily's deception became clear when Tom Morrison called me with results from his investigation into our joint financial accounts. I was reviewing permit applications in my office when he delivered news that made my blood run cold. Marcus, you need to sit down for this. Your ex-fiancé has been busier than we thought. Tom had discovered credit cards in both our names that I'd never signed for, totaling $45,000 in debt I knew nothing about. The charges painted a picture of someone planning an entirely different wedding than the one we discussed. She hired Bellecourt Wedding Designs, the same company that handled that senator's daughter's wedding last year. Their retainer alone was $18,000 for a destination ceremony in Tuscany. I stared at the credit reports Tom had obtained, seeing my name attached to expenses I'd never authorized. Venue deposits for a villa in Italy, designer dress fittings at boutiques I'd never heard of, catering quotes for a 100-guest celebration that would have cost more than I made in a year. How is this legal? How can someone open credit in my name without my signature? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. She used your social security number and employment information from your shared apartment lease. Technically, it's identity theft, but proving criminal intent gets complicated when you're engaged and living together. However, we can definitely pursue civil remedies. The paper trail told the real story of our relationship's final months. While I'd been carefully budgeting for our modest Miami Beach ceremony, Lily had been planning a luxury Italian wedding that would have bankrupted me and required using my construction business as collateral for additional loans. She'd even submitted preliminary applications for business loans using Davidson and Associates as security, apparently assuming I'd agree to risk my livelihood for her fantasy wedding. There's more, Tom continued. I did some research on the Hartwell family's business practices. Richard has a history of financial manipulation dating back 15 years. He destroyed a business partner named Michael Chen by similar tactics, running up shared expenses, then forcing Chen to choose between bankruptcy and signing over his ownership stake for pennies on the dollar. The pattern was becoming clear. This wasn't just about Lily being spoiled or making poor financial decisions. This was a deliberate strategy the family had used before to acquire assets and eliminate threats to their wealth. Chen's construction company had contracts with several hotel chains. Sound familiar? Richard took over those contracts after Chen was forced to sell, and now those same hotel projects are part of Hartwell's portfolio. I felt sick realizing how carefully they'd played me. My relationship with Lily hadn't been romance. It had been reconnaissance. They'd studied my business, my contracts, my financial capabilities, and planned to either absorb my company or destroy it depending on whether I proved useful or problematic. When Lily called that evening demanding I pay the cancellation fees for the Italian venue and cover her shopping sprees, I was ready for her. Marcus, you can't just abandon me with all this debt. We made these plans together, and you're legally responsible for helping me resolve this situation. I'd set up call recording software on Tom's advice, and every word of our conversation was being documented. Lily, we never made plans for a Tuscan villa wedding. I never agreed to $45,000 in credit card debt, and I certainly never authorized you to use my business as loan collateral. Those were just preliminary discussions. I was exploring options for making our wedding special, and you always said you wanted me to be happy. The gaslighting was almost impressive in its audacity. She was trying to rewrite history and make her fraud sound like relationship planning. I also never agreed to you secretly dating your ex-boyfriend while planning to blame our relationship problems on my unsuitability for your family. Silence. Then the sound of crying, but not the genuine tears of someone caught in wrongdoing. These were the calculated tears of someone whose manipulation tactics were failing. James and I are just friends. You're being paranoid and jealous because you know you can't provide the life I deserve. And there it was. The truth she'd finally stopped hiding. I wasn't her partner. I was a financial stepping stone she'd outgrown once better options presented themselves. Here's what's going to happen, I said, reading from the legal documents Tom had prepared. You're going to take responsibility for every penny of debt you created without my knowledge. I'm filing identity theft charges for the unauthorized credit accounts, and I'm demanding full documentation of every expense charged to my name. You can't destroy my credit over a misunderstanding, she protested. I can and I will, because this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was fraud. 2 days later, Tom received a call from the Hartwell family's attorney requesting an immediate meeting to discuss settling all claims out of court. Apparently, reviewing my evidence of financial deception had made their legal team very nervous about potential criminal charges. They want to meet tomorrow at their law firm's office, Tom told me. Big downtown partnership, marble lobby, mahogany conference room. They're trying to intimidate us with expensive surroundings. I laughed, thinking about spending my days on construction sites where real work got done by honest people. Tom, I've been building their luxury hotels for 3 years. Expensive surroundings don't impress me when I know exactly how much they cost and who's really paying for them. The Hartwell's lawyer, a smooth-talking partner named Bradford Whitney, opened the meeting by suggesting we could resolve everything quietly and amicably. Mr. Davidson, my clients are prepared to offer a generous settlement to avoid any further unpleasantness. Perhaps we could discuss a figure that would compensate you for any inconvenience while allowing everyone to move forward with dignity intact. I looked around the conference room with its expensive art and imported furniture, then at Richard and Patricia sitting stiffly in leather chairs like they were attending a hostile board meeting. Bradford, your clients committed identity theft, fraud, and attempted extortion. The only settlement I'm interested in involves them taking full responsibility for their crimes and staying completely out of my life. Richard's face turned red as he realized his usual intimidation tactics weren't working. You're making a serious mistake, Davidson. We have resources and connections you can't imagine. And I have evidence of felony fraud that your resources can't make disappear, I replied calmly. Choose your next move carefully. Richard's retaliation came swift and vicious, targeting every business relationship I'd built over 12 years in construction. Within a week, 3 major hotel renovation contracts had been mysteriously canceled, with project managers citing budget reassessments and shifting priorities. My phone rang constantly with apologetic explanations that all sounded suspiciously similar. Marcus, I'm really sorry, but corporate decided to postpone the Meridian project indefinitely, said Kevin Walsh, a project coordinator I'd worked with for 5 years. They're saying it's market conditions, but between you and me, someone's been making calls about your company's reliability. I knew exactly who'd been making those calls. Richard was systematically contacting every hospitality group in South Florida, spreading lies about poor workmanship and missed deadlines. Tom Morrison recommended I hire a private investigator to gather evidence of tortious interference, and he connected me with Rebecca Santos, a former FBI agent who specialized in corporate corruption cases. White-collar criminals like Richard Hartwell always leave paper trails, Rebecca explained during our first meeting. They can't help themselves from documenting their schemes because they need records to track their profits and leverage. Within 2 weeks, Rebecca had uncovered a treasure trove of information that made Richard's current harassment look like amateur hour compared to his actual crimes. Her investigation revealed systematic tax evasion spanning 8 years, with the Hartwell hotel chain underreporting revenue through elaborate shell company arrangements. More damaging was evidence of Richard bribing city planning officials to expedite construction permits and zoning changes, including payments totaling nearly $300,000 to facilitate hotel developments in protected coastal areas. Your ex-future father-in-law has been running a criminal enterprise disguised as a luxury hotel business, Rebecca reported. The bribes alone could result in federal racketeering charges, and the tax evasion represents millions in unpaid obligations to the IRS. But the most shocking discovery involved Patricia's gambling addiction, which had apparently cost the family nearly $200,000 in the past 18 months. Casino receipts and credit card statements showed her losing enormous sums at high-stakes poker games in Atlantic City and Las Vegas, often betting $50,000 in a single weekend. This explains why they were so desperate to get their hands on your money, Rebecca observed. They're not nearly as wealthy as they pretend to be. The mansion is mortgaged to the limit, the hotel business is leveraged beyond reason, and Patricia's gambling has created a cash flow crisis they've been hiding from creditors. I stared at bank records showing the Hartwells borrowing against their business assets to cover gambling debts and lifestyle expenses, realizing that my $35,000 wedding contribution had probably been earmarked to pay Patricia's casino markers. Their entire upper-class lifestyle was built on borrowed money and criminal activity, making their criticism of my blue-collar background absolutely hilarious in its hypocrisy. When Rebecca presented me with a comprehensive file documenting years of fraud and corruption, I knew I had the leverage to end Richard's harassment campaign permanently. What happens if this information reaches federal investigators? I asked. Richard goes to prison. Patricia faces criminal charges as an accessory, and their business empire gets seized under federal asset forfeiture laws. They lose everything. The next morning, I called Richard directly instead of going through lawyers. Richard, we need to have a conversation about your business practices and what happens next. Davidson, I already told you that threatening my family will have serious consequences, he blustered. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm explaining reality. I know about the shell companies, the tax evasion, the bribes to planning officials, and Patricia's $200,000 gambling problem. I have documentation that could put you in federal prison for 20 years. Dead silence. I could practically hear him calculating whether I was bluffing and realizing from my specificity that I definitely wasn't. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to call every hotel chain and contractor you've contacted about my company and retract whatever lies you've been spreading. You're going to publicly apologize for interfering with my business relationships. And your entire family is going to leave me completely alone for the rest of my natural life. You don't understand the position you're putting yourself in, Richard said, but his voice had lost its confident edge. I understand perfectly. I'm putting myself in the position of someone who can destroy your criminal enterprise with a single phone call to the FBI. The only question is whether you're smart enough to cooperate or arrogant enough to keep playing games you can't win. That afternoon, Rebecca intercepted communications between Richard and his lawyer discussing potential plea bargains and asset protection strategies. Apparently, my call had triggered panic mode damage control as they realized how thoroughly their crimes had been documented. They're terrified, Rebecca reported with obvious satisfaction. Richard's lawyer is already researching federal sentencing guidelines for racketeering and tax evasion. They know exactly how much trouble they're in. The corporate retaliation stopped immediately. Within days, apologetic phone calls came from every hotel chain that had canceled contracts, with project managers claiming there had been miscommunications and administrative errors that were now resolved. Kevin Walsh called personally to tell me the Meridian project was back on track with a bonus payment for the inconvenience. Marcus, I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but corporate suddenly decided you're their favorite contractor again, he said, sounding confused but relieved. Whatever you did to resolve this situation, it worked perfectly. I smiled, thinking about Richard discovering that intimidating honest working people was significantly more difficult than bribing corrupt officials. Kevin, I just provided some business associates with accurate information about their decision-making process. Amazing how quickly things improve when everyone's working with complete facts. Claire's social media warfare campaign started subtly, the way privileged people attack when they can't use direct confrontation. As a lifestyle influencer with 80,000 followers, she began posting carefully crafted content designed to paint me as a manipulative villain who'd stolen wedding funds and abandoned her heartbroken sister. Her Instagram stories featured cryptic quotes about toxic masculinity and financial abuse, with strategically placed photos of Lily looking devastated in designer outfits that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Some men will take everything from you and then play the victim when you finally stand up for yourself, read one post, accompanied by a black and white photo of Lily staring pensively out a window. Ladies, know your worth and never let anyone convince you that wanting security and commitment makes you greedy. The irony was breathtaking. The family that had called me a gold digger was now claiming I'd financially abused their daughter by withdrawing my own money after discovering her fraud. But Claire had underestimated the loyalty of people who actually knew me, and her campaign backfired in spectacular fashion when my coworkers and friends began responding with evidence of their own. Dave Thompson, my project manager, posted photos from our job sites showing the quality of work we delivered, along with testimonials from satisfied clients praising my integrity and professionalism. Been working with Marcus Davidson for 8 years, Dave wrote. He's the most honest contractor in Miami, pays his crews fairly, finishes projects on time and under budget. Anyone spreading lies about this man doesn't know what they're talking about. My crew members joined in, sharing stories about times I'd covered their medical expenses or helped them through financial emergencies, creating a counter-narrative that highlighted exactly the kind of character Claire was trying to destroy. But the real damage to her campaign came when Rebecca Santos provided my friends with photographic evidence of Lily's secret dates with James Morrison. Pictures of them holding hands at expensive restaurants, kissing in his BMW, entering his downtown condo together while she was supposedly committed to our engagement. Sarah Martinez, a project coordinator who'd become friends with both Lily and me, posted the photos with a simple caption. This is what was really happening while Marcus was planning their wedding and contributing his life savings. Some of us actually know the truth. The evidence spread through Miami's construction and hospitality communities like wildfire, reaching people who'd known both families for years and could recognize the manipulation tactics. Within days, Claire's influencer friends began distancing themselves from the controversy as the real story emerged, with several prominent Miami bloggers switching sides and calling out the Hartwell family's dishonesty. The social media war reached its peak when local news blogger Jennifer Reeves, who specialized in exposing wealthy family scandals, picked up the story and requested an interview. Jennifer had built her reputation by investigating corruption among Miami's elite, and the Hartwell saga offered everything her readers loved: privilege, betrayal, financial fraud, and spectacular consequences. Marcus, I've been following this story through social media, and frankly, it reads like a textbook case of how wealthy families manipulate working-class partners, Jennifer said during our phone interview. Would you be willing to provide a detailed timeline of events for publication? I agreed, partly because I wanted the truth documented, but mostly because I knew public exposure would prevent any future retaliation attempts. Jennifer's article, titled The Unsuitable Fiancé: How a Miami Hotel Dynasty's Classist Scheme Backfired Spectacularly, went viral within hours of publication. The piece meticulously documented Lily's financial deception, Richard's business crimes, Patricia's gambling addiction, and Claire's failed social media manipulation campaign. Jennifer had contacted former Hartwell employees who confirmed the family's history of financial abuse and provided additional evidence of their corrupt business practices. The Hartwell family's treatment of Marcus Davidson reveals the ugly truth about how America's wealthy elite maintain their status, Jennifer wrote. By systematically destroying honest working people who threaten their insular social circles, families like the Hartwells preserve a class system that benefits only themselves. The article sparked broader conversations about wealth inequality and privilege, with social media users sharing their own experiences of being deemed unsuitable by partners' wealthy families. #UnsuitableFiance became a trending hashtag as people posted stories about classist rejection and financial manipulation by privileged partners. The public humiliation hit the Hartwells where it hurt most: their carefully maintained reputation among Miami's elite social circles. Country club memberships came under review as members complained about being associated with criminal behavior. Patricia's charity board positions were quietly terminated as organizations sought to distance themselves from the gambling and fraud scandals. Claire's influencer career collapsed overnight as brands dropped sponsorships to avoid association with the family controversy. Desperate to salvage their reputation, Patricia made one final attempt at damage control by offering me $100,000 to sign a non-disclosure agreement and publicly reconcile with Lily. She called while I was reviewing blueprints for a new hotel project, ironically one that had been stolen from the Hartwells' contract portfolio after their corruption became public knowledge. "Marcus, please, we can make this whole nightmare disappear," Patricia begged. $100,000 in cash. You sign a simple agreement saying this was all a misunderstanding, and maybe you and Lily could even work things out. The offer was insulting in its transparent desperation. They wanted to buy their way out of consequences while learning nothing about why their behavior was wrong in the first place. "Patricia, your family spent months calling me unsuitable, manipulating my relationship, committing fraud in my name, and trying to destroy my business," I replied. "Now you want to pay me to pretend none of that happened so you can avoid facing the consequences of your criminal behavior. We made mistakes, but we're trying to fix them. Surely that counts for something. Your mistakes were actually crimes, and the only thing I'm interested in is making sure they never happen again to anyone else." I hung up and immediately called Jennifer Reeves to provide her with details about the attempted bribery, giving her another exclusive angle for follow-up coverage that would ensure the Hartwells couldn't buy their way out of the scandal they'd created. The financial collapse came faster than even Rebecca Santos had predicted, triggered by federal investigators who'd been monitoring the Hartwell empire since Jennifer's exposé provided roadmaps to their criminal activities. I was installing custom cabinetry in a downtown office building when Tom Morrison called with news that the FBI had raided Hartwell Hotel's corporate headquarters, seizing computers and financial records as part of a racketeering investigation. "Marcus, they moved on your information faster than I've ever seen federal agents work," Tom reported with obvious satisfaction. Apparently, the evidence Rebecca gathered was so comprehensive that prosecutors didn't need months of additional investigation. They had everything required for immediate action. The raid made front-page news in the Miami Herald, with photos of FBI agents carrying boxes of evidence from the luxury office suite where Richard had conducted his fraudulent operations for years. The article detailed charges including tax evasion, money laundering, bribery of public officials, and conspiracy to commit fraud, crimes that carried potential sentences totaling 40 years in federal prison. Within days, major hotel chains terminated their contracts with Hartwell Hotels, citing morality clauses and criminal association policies. The company's credit lines were frozen as banks discovered the extent of Richard's financial deception, and creditors began demanding immediate payment on loans that had been secured through fraudulent asset valuations. Patricia's gambling debts, now public knowledge thanks to court filings, provided additional leverage for creditors seeking to recover funds from the failing business empire. The mansion in Coral Gables, their primary residence worth nearly $3 million, went into foreclosure as mortgage payments became impossible without legitimate business income. I drove past the property one afternoon while heading to a job site and saw the for sale signs and moving trucks that marked the end of their privileged lifestyle. Claire's BMW was repossessed from the driveway while neighbors watched, providing the kind of public humiliation that wealthy families fear more than prison time. Lily's personal bankruptcy filing revealed the full scope of debt she'd accumulated while planning our fake future together. Beyond the $45,000 in unauthorized credit cards, she owed money to wedding planners, dress designers, travel agents, and luxury vendors who'd expected payment for services rendered for a Tuscan ceremony that would never happen. Her credit rating became so damaged that she couldn't qualify for apartment rentals, forcing her to move back into her parents' house just as they were losing it to creditors. "The irony is beautiful," Rebecca observed during one of our final meetings. She destroyed her financial future trying to plan a wedding that was designed to give her access to your financial stability. Now she's got neither the wedding nor the stability, and her family's criminal behavior has made her unemployable in her chosen field. Claire's influencer career disintegrated as brands discovered her association with federal crime and corruption scandals. Companies that had paid her thousands for product endorsements terminated contracts immediately, demanding return of money and merchandise provided for promotional purposes. Her social media following declined rapidly as followers realized they'd been supporting someone whose lifestyle was funded by criminal activity rather than legitimate success. The psychological pressure destroyed what remained of family unity as they turned against each other while facing prosecution and financial ruin. Claire publicly blamed Lily for destroying our lives with her stupid relationship choices, while Patricia accused Richard of hiding the extent of their legal and financial problems. Lily posted desperate messages on social media claiming she'd been manipulated by her family and had never understood the criminal nature of their business operations. "My family made decisions without my knowledge that destroyed my relationship and ruined my life," she wrote in a lengthy Instagram post that garnered mostly negative comments from people who remembered her previous attitude toward me. "I lost the best man I've ever known because I was too naive to recognize how toxic and criminal my family's behavior had become." The post felt like a last-ditch attempt to distance herself from her family's crimes while positioning herself as another victim rather than an active participant in their scheme. But her own fraudulent behavior regarding our wedding funds and secret affair with James Morrison made it impossible for anyone to view her as purely innocent. Patricia's nervous breakdown occurred during a court appearance for her gambling debt lawsuit, where she collapsed while testifying about spending $200,000 in casinos while her family committed fraud to maintain their lifestyle. The judge ordered psychological evaluation and treatment, leading to her admission to an expensive rehabilitation facility that drained even more money from their shrinking resources. Richard's sentencing hearing was scheduled for 6 months later, but his lawyers had already begun negotiating plea agreements that would require full restitution to defrauded parties and cooperation with ongoing investigations into municipal corruption. The man who'd called me unsuitable and threatened to destroy my business was facing the prospect of dying in federal prison while I expanded my construction company with contracts freed up by his criminal empire's collapse. From my perspective, watching their downfall felt like seeing justice served with mathematical precision. Every consequence they faced stemmed directly from choices they'd made while trying to manipulate and exploit people they considered beneath them. Their classist attitudes and criminal behavior had created the exact conditions that would eventually destroy them, while the unsuitable, working-class man they tried to eliminate was thriving in the aftermath of their self-inflicted destruction. 6 months later, Davidson and Associates had become one of Miami's fastest-growing construction companies, with contracts from 3 major hotel chains that had previously worked exclusively with Hartwell Hotels before discovering Richard's criminal activities. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now building the luxury properties his corrupt empire had lost, using the same skilled crews and honest business practices that his family had dismissed as unsuitable for their social circle. I was reviewing architectural plans for a beachfront resort renovation when my secretary announced that Lily was in the lobby requesting a meeting. My first instinct was to have security escort her out, but curiosity about what desperate scheme had brought her to my office made me agree to see her. She looked exhausted and significantly thinner than I remembered, wearing a simple dress that was probably borrowed given her bankruptcy status. More shocking was the obvious pregnancy that she tried to conceal with loose clothing and strategic positioning. "Marcus, thank you for seeing me," she said, settling carefully into the chair across from my desk. I know I have no right to ask for your time after everything that happened. I studied her face, noting the dark circles under her eyes and the nervous way she kept touching her stomach. Lily, what do you want? I assume this isn't a social visit to catch up on old times. I'm pregnant, she said, as if I hadn't already noticed. James is the father, but he disappeared the moment I told him. Claimed he never wanted children and blocked my number after I mentioned child support obligations. The same James Morrison she'd chosen over me because he represented the wealthy lifestyle her family demanded. Now he'd abandoned her the moment she became inconvenient, leaving her with nothing except the consequences of her choices. I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm not sure why you're telling me this. Because you were the only man who ever really loved me, she continued, tears starting to fall. James never cared about me as a person. He just wanted the excitement of an affair with someone engaged to another man. Once the thrill was gone and real responsibility appeared, he ran. I watched her cry and felt nothing except mild sympathy for someone who'd finally learned the difference between being wanted and being valued. Lily, what exactly are you asking me? I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I was hoping maybe we could try again. Start over and build something real this time, something based on actual love instead of my family's twisted expectations. The audacity was breathtaking. She'd betrayed me, committed fraud, and destroyed our engagement for another man, and now expected me to rescue her from the consequences while raising his child. You want me to take you back after you chose someone else, even though you're pregnant with his baby? I made a terrible mistake. I was young and stupid and let my family poison my judgment about what really mattered. You were everything I actually needed, but I was too selfish and immature to recognize it. I leaned back in my chair, considering the woman who'd once called me unsuitable and demanded space to think about our future. Lily, do you remember what you told me the night you asked for a break? She looked confused, probably having forgotten her exact words in the chaos that followed. You said I wasn't marriage material and that smart women have financial safety nets. You called me paranoid and jealous when I questioned your relationship with James. You told me I couldn't provide the life you deserved. Her face crumpled as the memory returned. I was angry and scared and said things I didn't mean. No, you said exactly what you meant. The only thing that's changed is that your better option abandoned you, and now you're looking for someone to clean up the mess you created. I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the construction site where my crew was building something permanent and valuable through honest work. Marcus, please, I know I hurt you terribly, but people can change. I've learned so much about what really matters, and I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you. Lily, I'm engaged to someone else. The words hit her like a physical blow. She stared at me in shocked silence, probably having assumed I'd been waiting around hoping for her return. Her name is Amanda Torres. She's a structural engineer who owns her own consulting firm. We met on a job site where she was reviewing foundation specifications for a condo complex I was building. Amanda was everything Lily wasn't: independent, accomplished, genuinely interested in my work, and completely comfortable with her own success. She'd insisted on paying for our first 3 dates and split all expenses equally throughout our relationship. More importantly, she respected my background and ambitions instead of viewing them as obstacles to overcome. When's the wedding? Lily asked quietly. This Christmas. Amanda suggested we use the money I'd saved for our original wedding to buy a house instead of throwing an expensive party. She said building equity together was more romantic than spending a fortune on one day. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. While Lily had secretly planned a lavish Italian ceremony designed to bankrupt me, Amanda had proposed practical financial planning that would benefit our shared future. I hope you'll be very happy together, Lily whispered, though her expression suggested she meant the opposite. We already are. As she prepared to leave, Lily paused at my office door. Marcus, for what it's worth, I really am sorry for everything. You deserved so much better than how I treated you. Yes, I did. And now I have it. After she left, I called Amanda to tell her about the unexpected visit. She laughed when I described Lily's proposal that I take her back and raise another man's child. Wow, She really thought you'd been sitting around waiting for her to realize you were the right choice all along. Some people's egos are absolutely incredible. The best part was seeing her face when I told her we're engaged. I don't think it ever occurred to her that I'd moved on and found someone better. Better is right, Amanda said with mock seriousness. I actually pay my own bills and everything. Revolutionary concept, I know. That evening, Richard's sentencing hearing was covered on local news, with reports that he'd received 15 years in federal prison for racketeering and tax evasion. Patricia remained in rehabilitation for gambling addiction and depression, while Claire had completely disappeared from social media and was reportedly working retail under an assumed name in another state. The family that had once called me unsuitable was destroyed, scattered, and facing decades of consequences for their criminal behavior. Meanwhile, I was planning a future with someone who appreciated my character instead of calculating my net worth. Being called unsuitable by corrupt, criminal people had turned out to be the highest compliment they could have given me. Their rejection had freed me to find someone who valued integrity over social status and honest work over inherited wealth. Amanda and I were building something real together, something that would last because it was based on mutual respect rather than financial manipulation or social climbing. Looking back, I realized that Lily's betrayal had been the best thing that ever happened to me. Without it, I never would have discovered how much better life could be with the right partner.